I believe your thoughts, your words, and your actions should line up. Not as some moral ideal, but because it feels wrong when they don't. We've all been there, that quiet discomfort when you think one thing and say something else, or say nothing at all. Psychologists call it cognitive dissonance. I call it being untrue to yourself. And right now, a lot of people are living exactly that. They see what's happening, they have an opinion, and they stay quiet anyway. Not always out of fear, sometimes just because it's easier, because they don't want conflict, because they don't want to upset anyone, because they're hoping it will sort itself out. The path of least resistance. I get it, but the longer you walk that path, the harder it gets to turn around, and the louder that discomfort gets on the inside. And it can also actually create a physical disease on the long term. I've always said what I think. That was never a conscious choice. It just feels like the only way that makes sense to me. But I see people around me who think the same things I do and say nothing, who nod when their concerns get dismissed as racism, who stay out of it even though they're directly affected, who say, I'm glad you said that, and they don't say it themselves. And I keep asking, what happens when everyone thinks that way? Nobody speaks, nothing changes, and the loudest voices fill the space on all sides. That's why I'm making this video, not to tell anyone what to think, but to show that you can say this clearly, without hate, without having to apologize for it. Now I'm going to say something a lot of people know, but are afraid to say out loud. We have a serious problem with crime, committed by people who have no legal right to be here, people who were already supposed to be deported, who have deportation orders against them, legally binding, signed, and yet they're still here, still committing crimes. These are not all migrants, not even close to the majority, but there are people who are deliberately gaming the system, who know nothing will happen to them, who know the consequences won't come. And that makes people angry, rightfully so. Think of Henry Nowak, think of Stephen Ogilvie, think of the girls and women who have been victims of violence. Think of all those we never even hear about because their cases get buried in statistics. These are real people with names, with families, with lives that someone destroyed, someone who should have been gone a long time ago. This is not some abstract political debate. This is a human catastrophe, a concrete one. And what does politics do? They look away, they talk, they set up committees, and they don't act. Now, there's something I need to say because it really matters to me. There are people suffering from this situation just as much, and almost nobody talks about them. These are the migrants who came here to build a new life, who work, who pay taxes, who send their kids to school, who learned the language, who respect the law, who became part of the society by choice, not obligation. They generally enrich it, and I mean that, no brackets. And what happens to them? They get tarred with the same brush. Every time another migrant makes the news for a crime, it lands on all of them. That's not fair. We all know it isn't. But I'll say it anyway. It's human and it's unavoidable. Because we can't know every single person individually. Because our brain looks for patterns when they're scarred. Because generalizations happen when trust breaks down. So who's actually responsible for that? Not the people on the streets who are frightened. The responsibility lies with the criminals who drag their entire community's reputation through the mud every day. And with politicians who refuse to act and in doing so keep that cycle running. The migrants who are truly part of this society, the ones who generally belong here, they deserve to have this problem solved for their sake too. So people finally stop lumping them in with people who have absolutely nothing in common with them. And now people are taking to the streets. In England, in Northern Ireland, in Germany and Spain, everywhere. Not out of hate, not because they dislike foreigners, not because they're far right, but because they're scared and because no one else is speaking for them. Let me be clear, it is not racism to take to the streets and say, I want the rule of law to apply in my country. I want laws to actually be enforced, not just written. I want my children to grow up safe. I want the same rules to apply to everyone, no exceptions. That's not hatred. That is the foundation of any democracy. And yes, among these protesters, there are sometimes people with very different motives. People who generally hate, people who use racism as cover. I condemn that, fully and without reservation. But those people are in the minority, and they don't make everyone else's concerns wrong, just as one criminal doesn't make all migrants criminals. A politician from Northern Ireland recently put it well. Multiple things can be true at once. All violence is wrong, all racism is wrong. Those who burn houses, who attack people, deserve swift and firm justice. And at the same time, criminals, regardless of where they're from, must face the full force of law. Anyone who's still here despite a deportation order and continues to commit crimes must be deported immediately. This is not about where someone comes from, it's about the rule of law. And at the same time, legal migrants, those who generally contribute, are welcome. They belong here. They are part of us. And at the same time, talking about all of this is not racism. It's a responsibility. To the politicians, and I mean this with everything I've got, the time for waiting is over. If someone is a criminal and has no right to remain, they need to go, not someday, not after the next committee meeting. Now, deportation orders must be carried out, not as a political signal, because it's the law. Secure borders and a functioning immigration system. That is not a far-right agenda. That is a basic duty of any government. And it means listening to the people living in the affected neighborhoods, to those experiencing this every day. And yes, to the integrated migrants too, who have been saying for years what works and what doesn't. Those who fail to act now are not just risking public safety, they're risking trust in the rule of law itself. And once that trust is gone, the people who always wanted to tear it down have won. I said it at the beginning, your thoughts, your words, and your actions should line up. If you're watching this and thinking, yes, that's exactly how I feel, then this is your moment. Not to provoke, not to fight, just to be honest with yourself and with others. The people who always take the path of least resistance, who stay out of it even though they're directly affected, they carry that dissonance with them day after day, and that's not healthy. And it takes more energy than simply saying what you think. You have the right to speak, clearly, without hate, without apologizing for it. Because a society where everyone thinks but nobody speaks isn't a free society. It's just a quiet one. Speak clearly, speak honestly, speak without hate, and stand up for each other, even for those who look different from you but share the same values. We are not fighting against migrants. We are fighting for a society where everyone, truly everyone, can live safely and freely. And that excludes the perpetrators, not because of where they're from, but because of what they do. Thoughts, words, action. Bring them into alignment.